Hello and welcome to Memoirs of Successful Women. I'm Annie Gibbins, founder and CEO of Women's Biz Global, and I invite you to kick off your heels, get comfortable, and be ready to receive the golden nuggets that are shared as you listen in to candid conversations I have with fascinating women from around the globe. Business leaders, entrepreneurs, humanitarians, athletes, and a whole lot of regular people. They will keep you riveted as they let their guard down and open up on aspects of their business and life journey, how they measure success and what they have learned along the way. My intent is that our conversations will inspire you to embrace opportunities and possibilities beyond the limits of your imagination, because I know that this is where we reclaim our power. I want you to reclaim your power, your strength and vulnerability, to stand in your truth and propel yourself towards the life that you dream to live. Hello and welcome to Memoirs of Successful Women. I am super excited to be connecting with you all again this week, and I am not going to disappoint because we have an amazing guest today. Her name is Rosie Golby, and I actually met Rosie at an airport going to New Zealand with my lovely hubby James, and Rosie was just sitting next to us having a cup of tea, and of course, Annie being Annie, we suddenly started chatting, and you are just going to be absolutely dazzled by Rosie. So before I introduce her to you, welcome, Rosie.
Thank you very much.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you. And Rosie's not Australian. She's not New Zealander. She's actually English. So you'll hear that in her beautiful accent today. And we're going to be talking all things rugby and women's rugby, because Rosie has been in the rugby family for more than 35 years. After playing rugby at university, she became involved in administering the World's Game at a national level. Now, it wasn't a World's Game at this stage. It was just a thing that you did at uni or you did in your own country. And we are going to be talking about her incredible journey of watching a sport that became a very strong female sport go global. So welcome, Rosie. I would love you to tell us, just start off now, of why were you going to New Zealand? What was happening in New Zealand? Why were you just so excited when we met you?
It was so exciting. I was off to watch the Women's World Cup. World Cup 2021 that had been delayed because of COVID. It was in New Zealand. It was the first time a World Cup had been held in the Southern Hemisphere. It was also the first time a World Cup for the women had gone over 6 weeks. And I was on my way to watch the quarters, semis and finals. And I was just so looking forward to it.
Oh my goodness. And we just picked up your energy. We went, oh, isn't it just so exciting when you're doing something, is going to watch something that you love, and you're just going to have a ball that connects you with all those other people who are in your world, right? So it gives an opportunity to actually, go somewhere that everyone in the world of women's rugby is going to be there, right? They're all going to be cheering, celebrating, wanting, obviously, to win, but just to celebrate the moment that, women's rugby is actually, growing and having this global presence. So I would love you to take us back then, because it wasn't always this way. You started, tell us your journey then at when you used to play rugby, and then you're thinking, wouldn't it be great if female rugby, could actually be a bigger thing? We all watch men's sport. What were your views when you were a young girl playing rugby, thinking, where could this go? Was it a dream that it could be one day you get a World Cup, or was it that you actually went, you know what, if we all just bandy together, we can make this happen?
I don't think we sort of thought of it as a dream. We just wanted to play rugby. So I started playing at university, like a lot of women did in the 80s, because that's where the rugby clubs were. And you played rugby, you played against other universities. And as those women left university, they set up clubs around the country. And I think that was just it. We just wanted to play rugby. I don't think we had any other thoughts at that point in time. And what happened was the Women's Union was formed by a group of very inspiring women who decided we needed to do something slightly more formalised about it. And I happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I was asked to sit on that national committee. I had to go for it to be elected, and it was all because somebody had asked me to organise a sevens tournament at very short notice. And I said, as you do, yes, of course I will. We'll have a national sevens tournament at our club, which was Oxford at the time, and I'll organise it in 6 weeks. Of course, why not? And based on that, I was asked if I'd go to the AGM, and I stood and I became assistant secretary for what was then the Women's Rugby Football Union, which covered England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And I guess it all just went from there.
They definitely asked the right person, right? You've got to ask the doers. You've got to, everyone knows, that we love all the ones who are actually, playing the game, doing all the amazing things, getting the sponsorship, the promotions. But we forget that it actually has to be the doers, the administrators, the people who can actually show up at all of those meetings, have agendas, have plans of what we're wanting to achieve, how we're going to do it. And so therefore, I love celebrating every element of what it actually takes. So you must have been pinching yourself back in those days going, oh my goodness, I'm now the secretary of the World, Rugby Football Union. Was it a World Football Union then? It was just Great Britain. So it was just Great Britain at the time. And did I pinch myself? No, I don't think I did. I just thought that we were trying to facilitate rugby for women across Great Britain, and you just had to go through certain steps to allow us to do that. There was an international stage, and Great Britain played initially, and then the respective home nations played, and you just got on and did it. And there was all these women that just volunteered. And did they volunteer? I mean, we had no base. So we used to have committee meetings at different people's houses in England. So one time you might be in London, then you might be in Yorkshire, then you might be down in Devon. And you just knew that your Saturdays on those committee dates, and I think they were probably every 6 weeks, you would be spending your whole day driving to somebody's house to sit in a house and take decisions about the game that we thought were the right decisions at the time. And different people stepped forward, but people had different skills. There were some people who were really good at sponsorship. There were some people that wrote the rules, did the coaching. We had women that ran the leagues, and their job was, yes, we'll set up a league and we'll organise a league because that means we have structured rugby. Why wouldn't you? I mean, it was literally, why wouldn't you? Why would you want to do that? It's just a good idea. I love it. It's no great revolution of this is going to be super amazing. It's kind of like, well, why wouldn't you want to be doing this? We just love it. We want to see where it's going, and we all need to do our part. So let's just, hunker down and make that happen. And it certainly takes a village. And that's what your story is actually showing, that all these people just show up, week after week, month after month, and they do their bit, and they don't complain, and they hope that it's helpful. Right. So on that journey, you then were a significant part of helping to build rugby in Britain. But then how did you do that big leap? How does from where you were positioned that go to a world group? You suddenly then having to have a whole lot of different skills, a whole lot of different relationships, a whole lot of different countries at different stages of their sport, with all these people who just meet up and make things happen. It's a massive shift to actually have something that is truly global.
It is. And I think what happened was that 4 women decided that they would hold a World Cup in 1991, and they came to our committee and said, we'd like to hold a World Cup in Wales. Richmond had gone on tour to New Zealand, and other clubs have been playing, inter-country. And so we said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's go ahead, organise World Cup. So these 4 women organised the 1991 World Cup, which wasn't sanctioned by World Rugby at that point in time. There was no funding for it. They had full-time jobs. One of them had a daughter and was on maternity leave. Another one, as the World Cup started, she started her maternity leave because her baby had just been born. So they organised this World Cup. that was based in Wales. And at the time we thought, well, we've got all these nations together. Let's get the representatives together and let's have a first committee. So that was what we did. Or it wasn't a committee, it was a meeting about the development of the game and what we should do and where we should go. And it was an introduction, getting the administrators, I guess, to talk to the administrators. And we did invite what was the IRB, which was World Rugby then, and they did come, but there still wasn't a recognition about the women's game. And at that meeting, I met a couple of women from America and Canada, respectively. And it sort of went quiet afterwards and not a lot happened. But then in 1994, it was decided that there'd be another World Cup, and it was going to be the Netherlands. They'd said they would host it in 91, but for various reasons they couldn't. So at short notice, Scotland decided or offered their services and said, yep, we'd like to organise the World Cup. So the 1994 World Cup was held in Edinburgh, organised by a committee of women, including Sue Brodie, another amazing Scottish woman who was instrumental in the development of the game in Scotland. And at that meeting, we had another world meeting, and Jill and Jamie from Canada and America and I spoke beforehand. We had a conversation, and we spoke about some of the things we thought that we should do and where the game should go. And we again invited World Rugby to attend. Keith Rowlands attended, who was running the game in Wales, based in Wales, but around the world. And you have to remember the men's game was only just coming on board, I guess, from a World Rugby point of view. It was only just after their first World Cup they'd had, or their second World Cup. So it was all really new. And what happened was we had that committee meeting, and afterwards Jill, who was became president of the Canadian Rugby Union, and Jamie, who was running women's rugby in Canada, or the chair of women's rugby in Canada, and I were invited to the 1994 meeting of World Rugby, where the game was formally recognised, and that was just it.
They're like, whoa! For those listening in, we're just doing a little girly woohoo high five here, because that is just so exciting. That's when you pinch yourself and go, what are we doing? We're actually at this world, this meeting of going, it's all going to happen. So exciting. So super exciting, but also suddenly so challenging. Right, because you've also then got women who have got, pregnancies on and off. You've got their families. You've got gender biases of time that women can therefore socially be sort of committing to their sport and their and the time that they're spending on hobbies, if you like. You've also got a massive pay disparity of who's going to fund these women to actually be getting to an elite level of sport, and all the trimmings that come with that, of being even to be able to get to these events, airfares, accommodation. What were the biggest challenges that you and your committee found at that stage? That's just me imagining, oh my gosh, like it's super exciting. And then you go, how are we going to do this? How then, when you have an opportunity, how do you back it up?
So there's different things. So there's a national level and there's an international level. At a national level, I think that our challenges were, you're women and you want to play rugby. And there was just but why? Why do women want to play rugby? So there was that barrier to overcome. There was a lot of reservations about that. And you hear some of the stories about clubs who had certain conditions about the women joining and setting up their clubs. So we had a lot of that in the 80s and 90s. I remember going to a meeting and some man saying to me on the sideline, well, why would you want to play rugby? I said, well, for the same reason that the men want to play rugby. You want a competitive team sport that is a contact sport, that you train together, that you play together, that you win or you lose together. What's the difference? And to me, I didn't see that was, I didn't really...
You didn't compute, but he's thinking, why would those lovely girls want to get bruises? Why would they want to do this when there's so many other gentle things that they could be doing? It's just a social change, and it's that's reinforced by the era that they're in as well. So there's not necessarily judgment on that. Everyone thought that way, and so you're really breaking through. You're pushing barriers. You're changing a community's perspective on actually what is socially even appropriate for women.
We were, but if you look about it, and I was reading a book that's been written recently about the 1991 World Cup. Women were playing rugby in the 1800s and the early 1900s. It just all went very quiet for a very long period of time. And yes, we did. That was one of the challenges, was men or people in general couldn't understand why you wanted to play rugby. And I think the other challenge was funding. The women's game in Great Britain and then in England was seriously underfunded, and everything was done on a shoestring. People put vast amounts of their own time and their resources behind them to make things happen. I moved jobs I moved jobs in 1991, and one of my conditions was, could I have a fully expensed car, because actually I was doing so much driving around the country for rugby. I needed to be able to, I wanted some support on that, and I don't think my company really realized that. I also said to them, would you mind very much if I use the phone sometimes for rugby related queries? What they didn't know was that my phone number...
There's a lot of queries.
They didn't know that actually my work number was the only number for the whole of the WRFU for a period of time. So anybody who wanted to contact you during the day phoned my work number, and my lovely secretary picked up all those calls and dealt with them,
I absolutely love that. That is so funny. Oh, your poor boss. As a boss, I'd be like, oh, I should know that. But hey, they didn't ask and you didn't tell.
I didn't tell them.
And that's what is part of. You know what? They're actually a part of that journey as well now. So they should be thankful. Now, you touched on sponsorship. That is huge. That is absolutely huge, because this isn't a whole area then suddenly becomes, it's a real skill and expertise to actually be able to, pitch for sponsorship. It's another skill to be able to, close that sale, that deal, that opportunity for people to sponsor. There's the value add, there's the image, there's the brand, there's so many things. So during this journey, and I love the way, the real honest truth is this has taken a, 20-year plus journey of evolution. It doesn't happen overnight. This is people like yourself, like all of those other ladies, and who I know that you would love to celebrate all of their achievements as well. That collectively you just keep showing up, and building what then becomes, a very, very highly professional organization. But they all came from these grassroots in someone's bedroom, someone's house, have over coffee, and using your work's benefits. So how did you go about that? How did you actually go about funding so that you would then be able to be the professional outfit that you wanted to be?
I think that we were very lucky that some of the women that were playing their roles was to get sponsorship. That's what they did in their full-time professional roles. So they used that. We spoke to our employers. A lot of employers funded and gave us grants. We worked very hard with Sport England trying to fund us. And then gradually, the RFU came on board. The women's game became part of the RFU in England, and that meant there was more funding, and that's where a lot of the funding comes from now. That's why you see the professional players, the current Red Roses, a lot of them have full-time contracts because the RFU are funding that. But there are lots of nations all over the world that are still not at that stage. They've not got professional players. They were playing at a World Cup, and they weren't professional players. They'd come from their countries. They'd probably paid their flights themselves or contributed to the flights themselves, and they've worked full time, and they've put their training around their full-time jobs and their families so that they can play. And that's just where the game is. And that's I think that's just where we are, and we're very lucky in England that we're so well funded.
Yeah, and I think that happens in all sports. I know, even in when I was growing up, and my father used to watch rugby league. People were doctors or accountants, and they actually were just fit, and then they still played elite league at that stage until the profession actually became professionals, that they actually had payment to be able to not have to go to the day job, that their job was to actually be so fit and ready, match ready, to be able to hopefully ideally win over your competitors. And but that's a huge leap. So first of all, congratulations for you be able to help be able to pioneer that, and also appreciation and respect for those people who are still at stages in this game, who are doing their day job, doing everything really, and then still just showing up and doing that because family, friends, their communities support them, and that's just the way it is, and that's how we sort of evolve different sort of professions. So what have been the biggest changes that you've seen in women's rugby over the last 5 years or so, as it's really started to emerge as a big global sport?
So if I say, when I was at the final of the World Cup in Auckland, I just stood there with tears in my eyes before the game even started. And that was because there were 42,000 people watching the game live. And going back to 91 in Wales, where maybe we had 2,000 at that final, that is a huge thing. The fact that I knew the coverage was on ITV and it had been live. Every game had been live. We'd got players there that were professional. And I think that's the change we've seen in the last 5 years. We've seen the increase in media coverage, which has been huge. And that's partly because there's so much more media coverage of the women's sport generally. We've seen a huge increase in funding, and I think the players generally are so much fitter and so much more athletic than they've been before. And that's partly because of the skill set of the support team they've got around them, but it's also the fact that they've got the funding. But it was almost overwhelming standing there in Auckland at Eden Park, seeing all those people there, and to then have been in New Zealand, and you turn up in some village and they say, oh, why are you over here? And you say, well, actually, I've come to watch the World Cup. They go, yes, it's been great, hasn't it? We've watched the games. We're going to go with a friend to watch it on the TV because we couldn't get tickets because there's been such an increase of attention about it. And then when I came home, people that I would never have expected to watch the game have been watching the game. And that in itself has been the change, that it's so much more accessible to the general public, and so many more people are just watching it, and it is just so exciting. I remember when we had the first Olympics, when the sevens was played in the women's Olympics, the women's sevens. I remember being in England watching it in Rio. And it was the first sevens. It was like, oh my goodness, we're at the Olympics. Women's rugby is at the Olympics. And I was so the games were going on in Rio. I was in England. I was messaging Jill in Canada and Jamie in America, who were the two women that had been on this journey with World Rugby with me. And the three of us were messaging each other, and we were doing it live. We weren't having to scrabble around to find those games being thing. It was like, look, did you see that try? Wasn't that amazing? And you just think that's the change that we've seen. The fact that it's so much more accessible. You don't have to wait until 2 weeks later when World Rugby magazine comes out that they've got a quarter of a page about it.
Yeah. Exactly. You're in the moment. To be able to be sitting there, I can just picture you in that field in Auckland, by the way, with you and your friends going, oh my gosh, this is just, it's surreal. It's so exciting. The athletes must just look like superhumans because of that funding, because of, the support that they have. It's not just having the best coaches, it's the nutritionists, it's the exercise physiologists, it's the psychologists, it's the whole package that actually helps these athletes become become elite athletes, and it must just be like, wow, amazing, and just so triumphant seeing them, show up into their best form, and also just being part of that whole moment, a moment in history. I think it's just so exciting, but also for those women now coming through to actually go, if you're that girl, if you're Rosie now at 19 playing, rugby at university, or even, in your childhood, they now get an image. They get a visual of, I watched rugby on the telly. I have seen them at the World Cup. I see that you can be this professional athlete. I see that, you can be supported in your sport. That's a massive breakthrough for women's sport, because before then you didn't have that visual. If you were playing at 19, you didn't actually see that. No. You could be an elite athlete. You could make this your profession. So I just, congratulate everybody involved. And I know there are many, many other sports who are still emerging in this way. And the message of this conversation today is actually just stick with it, right? Do you now sort of, if you had someone else in a different sport who hasn't sort of done this progression yet, do you sort of, what would you say to them if you met them in the cafe? Would you go, never stop, keep going?
Yeah, I'd say never stop, keep going. It'll be worth it in the end. And I think also there's just this amazing cross-fertilization of information between sports. So you see in the men's game, I don't know, a football manager goes to watch a rugby game. Well, I know that the Lionesses coach for England women, she was watching the Women's Rugby World Cup in New Zealand because she wanted to learn about that. And that's the bit that you say, this is wonderful, because there's this huge cross-pollination of ideas, of concepts. We've got women that have played rugby who are now involved in hockey, or they've been involved in boxing, or they're coaching football. So they're moving out and coming into the women's rugby as well. So it's not just one way. And there's all these development programs at World Rugby level now to develop the referees, to develop the coaches, as well as the players. And those are the step changes, but that all comes back to funding, and so, like I said before, England is a very affluent society in terms of sport generally. We put a lot more money in, and that's probably why we do so well. And there are lots of other nations that have got to catch up with that. Will they? Yes, they probably will. How long will it take? I don't know. I mean, we could look at the men's game in any sport, in the men's game, can't you? In any sport, and you can say, there are nations that are so much further ahead than other nations. But no, it's from a women's rugby point of view, it's exciting. The World Cup in 2025 is coming to England. So that is even more exciting.
Oh my goodness. You're like, bring on 2025. Oh my goodness, forget the rest. Oh, yeah. That is super exciting. You're going to go crazy.
I mean, it's just great. And I think at the World Cup, there was a World Rugby meeting there during the Women's World Cup, which is a first as far as I'm aware. There was a coaching conference going on. There was then a Women in Sport conference afterwards. So it was bringing all these different people together around an event. And those are the sort of changes we would have never expected that in 91. We just wouldn't have expected that in 91. Why would you?
Why would you? And I love that some people, and I as a business coach, I get that. They go, but I don't know what the dream fully looks like. And you go, you don't need to. You don't need to. You just need to be leaning into towards what is possible, right? The possibility, the infinite possibilities, to be able to thinking, okay, if we really feed this and nurture it and get all the right people on board, where can it go? And so sometimes that dream is there, and sometimes it's like, oh my God, I couldn't have even dreamt it at that stage. It was just too unrealistic. But as you've shown in this sport that, you know, every time you got to a new sort of summit, you then go, oh, there's another opportunity, and we can just keep chipping away. And that's actually, you know, a great message for this podcast today on success. This is what success takes. It actually means that you just keep showing up. You put your best foot forward. You also, I've heard a lot in your conversation is about the collective. It's about, you know, people in different countries all helping each other and turning up and being able to do their bit. And that is just so powerful, you know, and that's what it actually does take. That's when you get so much, that's where you get the synergy, you know, that the value is so much more than, you know, each individual part. Together, you have certainly achieved more. And that must make you just so proud.
It is, and we talk about the elite players because they have the visibility and they're seen because they're the competitors that are on the field. We then talk about the administrators like me at the national level, for example. But actually what we forget about is all those people who turn out week after week coaching their girls' teams in the pouring rain, and when there's only 6 of them there, when you need 15 for them to play, or you have, I don't know, somebody who does the washing of the shirts. I remember I used to take our rugby shirts home as a captain, and I used to put them through my washing machine because there wasn't another way of doing it. You know, and that's where you realise that, I guess it's like all sports, that it really is a pyramid, isn't it? Because it has taken every single one of those people along the way doing their little tiny bit to get us to where the game is now.
Yes.
And would we have known? Of course we wouldn't have known. And did we think it would ever get there? I don't think we ever did. I don't think as maybe some of our committee members did, but I think looking back in the 80s, did we have a vision as to where we wanted the sport to be? No, I think we just wanted more people to play and to be accepted and to have a structure that allowed these women to play. And as it progressed, we said, okay, so we've got a league structure. So now we need a competitive structure, which means we have to be able to select an England team or a Welsh team. So we'll set up various organisations, county bodies or constituent bodies, so that they can do the selection process. And then, you know, well, when Jill, Jamie and I went to the World Rugby, that was very much, those early meetings were very much about talking about the next World Cups.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much about the development of the game. That came at a later stage when I'd stood down at that point. But it was just those little steps that we would do, and you'd say, well, this is the next thing, so let's just do it. And I think also it's don't take no for an answer. If we'd taken no for an answer, there wouldn't have been a 1991 World Cup. If Debs Griffin and her committee had said, well, the RFU hasn't sanctioned it, so we're not going to do it, it wouldn't have gone ahead. So we just did it. And it was like we put in place leagues. If we'd said, we've got no funding for it, so we won't do it, we would have never had competitive leagues in the women's game. You know, and all those women that used to play at international level, they all paid. They paid their flights, they paid for their kit, they would sew their emblems onto their kit on the days before matches, you know, because nobody said no. They just said, yes, this is what I want to do.
Oh my goodness. I hope everyone is writing that down. Write down the word, just tenacity, just, you know, resilience. There's all these things are going, you know, come on, you know, if someone knocks you down, just keep coming back. You just go, come back in a different way, come back in your own way. This is a classic example of if there's no door to open, you just create your own door. You know, you actually just go, okay, well, what is necessary for us to reach this next step? And if it is create our own sponsorship, sew our own badges on, do it. It's like we will show up despite, you know, and we'll do absolutely everything we can, and we'll show them that we are worth it. They didn't know your value then. They didn't know your worth. And so sometimes you actually have to prove that worth, and then suddenly people go, oh, we should be supporting this, you know, and there's many ways. And I just love the tenacity of you pioneering women, that you've actually gone, you know what, we're just going to keep coming anyway, keep coming and just breaking down those barriers. So now you're brave enough. You didn't have the big vision at the beginning, but now you do. You've got this amazing World Cup coming to your own home country in 2025. But do you even dream to dream more now? What do you boldly go, I hope this would be super exciting in my lifetime?
So what do I think? So it's I mean it's a whole group of other women that are doing the work now, so I can just turn up at the World Cup and enjoy it. What do I hope? I hope that that's a really, really difficult question. I hope that we fill Twickenham. I hope we get 82,000 spectators there. I hope that the funding becomes available for the women across the world to allow them to be the best that they can be. So Fiji, for example, or Samoa, or some of the smaller nations, I hope that funding becomes available and that they have the opportunity to develop to be the best they can be. And I think the other thing that I hope, which we've seen a real change from, we've seen a change of the commentary on the media. This World Cup, very much the commentary was, what fantastic games of rugby. This is just superb rugby. One commentator said about the World Cup final, which England did lose against New Zealand in the most outstanding match. The commentator said it was probably the best game of rugby he's ever watched. And that in itself is what we want as a game. I think that women just want to be accepted for the fact of how fantastic they play and what a good game they give. The final was, for me, devastating. I was sat next to a Kiwi couple whose daughter had come over to England last year in the November internationals, and when New Zealand had been beaten very convincingly by England, and she'd got injured, their daughter, but they'd still sat there at the World Cup, and we were talking about the game, and we talked about the game the whole way through. And the elation from the New Zealanders when they won, there was obviously a real minority of English people there, but the elation from the New Zealanders was phenomenal. But from a games point of view, from a world rugby point of view, that World Cup really said the women's game is here. It's got something to offer everyone who's interested in rugby and people who aren't interested in rugby. And I guess that's just what I want. I just want people to be able to see the game and enjoy it for what it is.
Oh, I love that. And what a great way to finish up. You started with dreaming of 2,000 people at your game. Then you've now seen 40,000 people at your game. And now you're like, oh, wouldn't it be great if 82,000 people filled this stadium? It's just like, yes. That is massive, actually, in what feels like forever for you, but actually is a short, now we're going exponential. And I love what you said there, that you actually just want these women to be at their best. When you know that you could have done better if you had certain elements of the support framework. And we know that it takes a massive team to be able to make that happen in elite sport. When you know that those women can actually just show up and just give it their best, and that they'd be just proud, even if they don't win on the day, they go, you know what, that was our best effort, and we're proud of ourselves and what we've achieved here. That's just what makes your heart sing, right? It's just, that's what it's worth it. And I think it's onward and upward, and I love the way you've also throughout this conversation sort of said, this is not just rugby, this is all women's sport, and we're all learning off each other, where there's definitely lots of checking each other out, what's worked for each other and what's not, because that's how we actually rise together. We actually support each other, that we're not competing against each other. And sometimes you kind of go, well, there's a certain amount of sponsorship dollar and it feels competitive, but when you actually rise above that and go, you know what, you just need to show your value and show what people could why you're worth investing in, and leave that sort of competitiveness amongst each other out of the equation, you get so much value, because all of these women and men working behind the scenes in all of these professional sport areas are all wanting the same thing. They just want to be the best of their best, and just to see out their dream, that you just go, oh my goodness, in my lifetime I want to see this happen. And I think you should be super, super proud of all that you have achieved, and I'd love you to pass that on to all of those other amazing ladies, and that you would love to be talking about, I know, as well today, because I know that's the sort of lady that you are, that you're like, I'm just one of many, but what you have achieved is truly phenomenal. So well done, you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Memoirs of Successful Women. I'm Annie Gibbins, founder and CEO of Women's Biz Global. And if you would like to fast track your future success, hop on over to womensbizglobal.com. Find out about all things women's biz, and most importantly, take the opportunity to have a free trial of Women's Biz Tribe. I look forward to seeing you online very soon. Until next episode.